at the core of this wonderful piece we're going to hear this week is text drawn from Paul Griffiths' novel called Let Me Tell You. And you may already know that the novel is told by Ophelia in Ophelia's own words. Paul Griffiths took all of the words that Ophelia speaks in the play and used those words and those words only to write this novel. He said in an interview that I read, he said something really interesting about this book, and I hope he'll talk to us a little bit about it. He said, "I wanted the book to do what novels generally do, tell a story. Ophelia has one of the play's most powerful lines. Lord, we know what we are, but know not what we may be. My attempt," says Paul Griffiths, "was to give her something of what she may be." It's a wonderful book, and I hope that you will tell us something about it, Paul, because it's text from that novel that then becomes the text sung by Barbara Hannigan in Hans Abrahamsen's piece, which is called Let Me Tell You. So, Paul Griffiths, tell us something.
Well, if I could begin by reading, I do this with some trepidation because I'm going to be reading some words that Barbara is going to be singing tomorrow night from this very same stage with Hans's music, completely transforming them. But Stephen Greenblatt just talked about the little song where she has the word snow, white as shroud as the mountain snow. And that gave me the opportunity to have a kind of snow scene at the end of this book. And I'll just read you a bit of this, including, as I say, words that will come in the piece. If I stand up, then you'll know when I'm standing up, I'm reading for the book. When I'm sitting down, I'm not. I go out now. I let go of the door and do not look to see my hand as I take it away. Snow falls. So I will go on in the snow. I have my hope with me and a staff in my hand. I look up as if I could see the snow as it falls, as if I could keep my eye on a little of it and see it come down all the way to the ground. I cannot. The snowflowers are all like each other, and I cannot keep my eyes on one. I have given up and gone on. I have turned to face again where I must go. There is light on the snow still, and there is light in the snow. All is still. There is nothing to call to me, no mark to show me the way. There is no one to speak, no one but me, and I do not speak. There is nothing. All is white. It is not as cold as it seemed when I was with the king and his lady, but memory is pale. It means little. It means nothing. Will is more. My will to be here in the majesty of the morning, where all is turned to white, where all goes to white, all but me. I could go again over my treads to where I've come from. This time, I could make things better for him. I know I could. It does not have to go as they say. I could do that, go home and not go on. I could go on and find what I still do not know. This way, that way. I have stayed here to think, and then I choose.
Beautiful language, but you made that language out of a selection of words.
Out of the words, yes. It's a little bit like counting Democratic votes in Iowa, that every time you count them, you come up with a different number. And I've been asked many times how many words there are in the part of Ophelia. I use the first folio text and also the good quarto text. And it's something like, it's a little bit under 500, it's something in the 480s, but it depends how you count. Because, for instance, she has the word I, which is just one letter I, but she also has I, short for in. So that's also I. Now, is that one word or two? So it's something like 480 words, but that includes vacancies and all kinds of things that you can't use too many times. It includes Hamlet as well, and they didn't want to have the book full of Hamlet. It would just have completely overpowered it. So she only uses Hamlet once. A lot of the words she only uses once, but
I think you rather enjoy the challenge. I mean, it's sort of like writing serial music or any other kind of restriction that a creator puts on himself, even writing a sonnet, I suppose. But I think I understand from what you've said elsewhere that you imposed a couple of other restrictions on yourself, and it may be because you enjoy it, or maybe because you thought you should. You said that whenever she speaks to another character in this book, she uses only words that are spoken both by her and by that other character. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I mean, there aren't too many characters in the book because she doesn't have names. She only has the name of Hamlet. She can refer to her father, she has the word father, and she can refer to her brother, Laertes, because she has the word brother, and she can refer to the king. She doesn't have queen, so we have the king and his lady, like in the bit I read out. And when those people appear in the book and speak, then they have to keep to their own vocabularies as well, because I can't have Polonius using words that he doesn't use in the play. So the whole novel is in the Ophelia vocabulary, so that's sort of one circle like that. And Polonius, here's his vocabulary, and it's just the overlap, this little lentoid shape here that Polonius can use in the book, and the same goes for the other characters who speak. Hamlet does not speak in the book. I couldn't make up words for Hamlet. That would have been ridiculous. So Hamlet doesn't actually speak as himself, but there is a play. I mean, because Hamlet has the play Hamlet has a play within a play, as we all know, so there has to be a play scene in the book, and Hamlet takes part in this little play reading, and then he can speak, but otherwise he's entirely silent, and Ophelia is thinking about him a lot of the time, but he in fact doesn't speak.
I think you said also that in this book there are sonnets, and that the sonnets are composed, as the whole book is, only of words that Ophelia speaks, but that each sonnet begins with a line that is a line from a Shakespeare play somewhere. Is that right?
Yeah. Well,
is that possible?
Let me, for my second... okay. The sonnets are addressed to Laertes. We have the family growing up. They start out as little children, and there are nursery rhymes, and they grow up, and Laertes by this time is a teenager, I imagine, and he has somebody writing love sonnets to him, and this is one of them. And I can't remember, Stephen will know very well what play the first line comes from. Each first line in the sonnet comes from one of the plays, but it has to be a line that Ophelia could speak. It has to be a line in the Ophelia vocabulary. They do not love that do not show their love. So should this love we have go on not seen? You are my owl, my robin, and my dove. You are what is to come and what hath been. I see you in the flowers upon the grass. I see you when I think and when I pray. I see you when I look into a glass. I see you as the sun and as the day. You are my saint, so I in God believe. My soul is in your hand, yours not to blame. All that I ask is that you should receive these gifts in which there never could be shame. In my heart, as in yours, there is no doubt. What reason then, my love, not to come out? So we have some guess about what this lover of Laertes is, maybe.
It's remarkable to me, not that you can do the trick of writing only in Ophelia's words, but you come up with such beautiful language. I don't know, that's because I think you're a gifted writer, and maybe the imposition of that kind of restriction helps.
Can I just say that Paul said that, I didn't know this, Ophelia doesn't use the word am.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he had to write this novel in the first person without using the word am.
That was one of the problems, yes. But
that's a little bit of a problem. Yeah.
So she has to use formulas like I would be, or I could be, or I have been, or I will be, but she can't actually say I am. I think it's quite significant for the play that here is a character who, in fact, doesn't talk very much about herself. So that's sort of one clue to her not talking about herself, that she doesn't have the word am. When you talk about the restrictions, and it sounds as if you're really handicapping yourself, but to me you're not. It's a liberation. And some of the language in this book, I mean, the sonnet is highly worked. It has the rhyme scheme of a Shakespearean sonnet and all the rest of it. But some of the language in this book is really very, very simple, and includes things that I could never have come up with. And somehow I wouldn't have dared almost. It's so simple, and it's a way of getting at things that you could never have imagined, and you wouldn't have dared use. You think, oh, I can't say that, and you can, because it's justified by the constraint and spurred by the constraint. It's not a constraint. It's a stimulus. I'd rather say it was a stimulus.
Things that your own experience and sort of your own personal makeup would never. These things would never occur to you.
Exactly.
But it allows you to say things that are actually in you. I mean, it all comes from you, doesn't it? In a sense.
I did write it, yeah, and I spent it was hard. It took me 13 years to write this book. It was hard, but a lot of people have said this, that you give somebody a blank page and they don't know where to start. But if I give you a blank page and say, okay, write a sentence in which every word has 5 letters, well, then you might come up with something interesting.
Well, you certainly did. And you came up with some very beautiful language. And it's from that language. Interesting that I'm pleased that you read that beautiful snow scene at the end, because Hans Abrahamsen has a piece called Schnee, a piece that's about snow in a way. And it's sort of tied into this whole complex of things, because this piece called Let Me Tell You is based on text from Paul's novel. Is that right? I don't know how the text came to be, but I believe that Barbara, in a way, was sort of, what would the organizer, the midwife, the person who brought all this thing into existence, partly, as I think it began, as a hoped-for birthday present to celebrate Paul's birthday and this wonderful book of his. Would one of you, Hans, how did this happen?
Perhaps Barbara would be the best to tell it, because
Maybe
you are
I should
near
tell.
to it. But,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, I think you should do it.
Well, it started with 2 women. It started with Paul's wife, Anne. Paul and Anne are good friends of mine. And Anne had emailed me quite a few years ago, maybe five years ago, asking me if I would sing at a surprise birthday that she wanted to have for Paul. And my calendar is always organized quite far in advance, and I looked at the date and I said, no, that's not going to be possible, but why don't we commission a piece as a present for him? And the obvious composer for the piece, the only composer for the piece, would be Hans Abrahamsen, because both Paul and I were in love with this piece that he wrote called Schnee, Snow, which is an instrumental piece. In fact, Hans had never written a major vocal work. And it snowballed, pardon the pun, into not a soprano and piano piece, not a chamber music piece, but an orchestral piece. And it was very clear that the text had to be from Let Me Tell You. Now, Paul still didn't know anything about this. We were working in secret, and I think we were already 6 months to a year down the road of it. And I was in contact with Hans, also through his publisher, and when we were discussing orchestras, because I have a very good relationship with the Berlin Philharmonic, I decided that they would be the ones that I would ask first if they wanted to take the commission. So I wrote to them, I wrote to Simon Rattle, and they said yes. Now, not a note had been written yet, but funnily enough, when I tried to give this book to Simon Rattle, he said, oh, I've already got it in manuscript form. So, but Simon wasn't able to do the premiere. He was clear that he said, my schedule is not going to allow it. So I was in communication with the Berlin Philharmonic about conductors, and I wanted Andres Nelson's. I knew the orchestra loved Andres. I had never met him, I'd never worked with him, but I knew that for this piece we had to have someone who was incredibly intelligent but was not going to come from an intellectual perspective into this piece. In my imagination, I just thought, we need Andres. And so I wrote him a letter and asked him if he would conduct the premiere. He said yes. Before Hans had written a note, I think we had 5 other orchestras already on board, which is quite uncommon, I have to tell you, in the world premiere world. And finally, I told you.
Yes. In the snow.
In the snow
in England.
In the snow in
yes.
England. We were sitting at post-concert at a hotel, and I sprung it on you that this was about to happen. It was kind of happy birthday. And that's how the piece came about. And I love that it came about from the creatives, not from management, not from any organization or any plan that thought this will be a hit. Nothing like that. Just the creatives working together, musicians to musicians. And out of that came this work, which has had quite a beautiful life. I mean, it's still only a toddler. It's 2 years old. And this is the 11th orchestra that we are performing it with. I've sung it something like 25 times. And it has become, from the very beginning, incorporated in me as the person to present it. But I feel that I am representing all of us when I sing the notes and the words.
It was performed by the Cleveland Orchestra recently, right? Most
Yes.
recently in Carnegie Hall.
Yes, the last performance we gave of it was 3 weeks ago. With Cleveland Orchestra, we gave 2 performances in Severance Hall, and then we took it to Carnegie. Yeah.
And you've recorded it, I think. So we can all go
Yeah.
out and get a recording.
Yeah, the CD came out 2 weeks ago, which is with Andres and the Bayerische Rundfunk of Munich.
Great.
We recorded it last July.
Can one of you say a word about what I presume you don't set the whole novel in this piece.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Did you select the words, Hans?
You know, as Barbara has always said, this piece has been surrounded by a lot of luck. Because when I was phoned, not by you, but by my publisher, she told me about the project and she had talked with you, Barbara. And then she asked me, do you know the book? Yes, I do. Have you read it? Yes, I have read it. Because I got it already, I think in 2009.
Yes, indeed.
Paul, you sent it to me after you have heard my piece.
Yes.
And
Well-
I read it, the book, with great joy. And even before I was asked to make music to it, I had it in my thoughts. And of course, the last snow scene, which you read, Paul, that was the one that at first inspired me, together with the beginning where she is talking about, how is it? Let me just have the book, Paul.
Yeah.
I have that with text. I can have a very bad memory. It's
On the first page? Or?
it's the very first. It's the very. So now I come to speak at last. I will tell you all I know. I was deceived to think I could not do this. I have the powers, I take them here. I have the right, I have the means. My words may be poor, but they will have to do. And that beginning of somehow to dare to use the words you have and to say what you have to say as precise as you can do with those words was a very good beginning for me, together with the end. And so when I was asked if I liked to make a work for you, Barbara, to Paul's wonderful words, I said yes. And then I was asked, I don't know if it was your suggestion, Barbara, but I should find selections in the book which I like to make into the work. And I very carefully took out, the very first song I took out was actually what Paul read. I will go out now and snow falls. And I made like a song, and then the other one was the beginning, and then I found places in the book that was about memory and about time, and also what can you say, the place where she meets Hamlet in a kind of love song. And as I remember, I made 8, and I'm a little perhaps traditional, and I love, for example, Strauss' 4 letzte Lieder. And I imagined actually a piece for soprano, 8 songs like that, and there were 8 songs. And I was very happy with what I have found, and then I met with Barbara in Berlin, and Barbara was also happy, but also a little critical, and we discussed it. And then we sent my 8 songs from Let Me Tell You to you, Paul. And
I fiddled about a bit.
And you were very, very fast. I think next morning, I was in Berlin meeting you, Barbara. We got the text back, and that was the text. And you have divided, actually you have taken out exactly my themes, but made them into 3 parts about how it was, and then the second part about how it is, and the third part about how it would be. And you had, in a way, 3 parts. And then that's my way of writing as a composer. I'm a kind of miniature composer. I saw the first part was so long. I had to divide it. So I divided the first part into 3 songs. So I, in a way, went back to my, I don't know if you have thought about that, but the songs are actually going attacca. There are no gap almost between them. And then the second part I made into 2, and the last part, the third, into 2 again. So that was how it was a very good process.
Hans just talked about being a miniature composer. I would take issue with that. This is a big piece.
It's over 30 minutes long. Yeah.
But yes, and of course it was the snow that somehow perhaps started it all. And actually I can remember I was in this is my second time in Boston. I was in Boston, I think it must have been in January 2013, where the piece Schnee was performed by Jeff Means and an ensemble. And that was when I was working on Let Me Tell You. And I remember those few days in Boston, it was very, very cold and a lot of snow. And I remember in the airport when I should home to Copenhagen, that I should fly over New York, but there was no flight because of the storm. And I had to be there 8 hours in the airport because I had then to go over Amsterdam, actually where you are living. And I remember sitting actually in the airport working on series for Let Me Tell You in the snow.
Snow has a lot to do with it. It sounds like an interesting kind of collaboration in which all 3 of you really are involved in one way or another. You say that you advised, after you saw a preliminary version, Barbara, there were some things you wanted to discuss with. Is that something you can talk about in public in front of us?
Well, there were a lot of things that Hans and I worked on together. I mean, my most beautiful memory is that Hans and I met in Berlin at a certain point, at the same time that you had chosen the text. And I gave him a kind of lecture demonstration, it must have been about 4 hours, I think, on kind of the history of vocal music. I was singing techniques for him that Monteverdi had used, showing him different Baroque techniques into classical. I showed him the different registers, for example, in Mahler 4, and how Mahler uses the voice in strophic sections in Mahler's 4th Symphony, and how he completely changes the color in the final verse. And I was singing for him and demonstrating. I was showing him the rules that exist, who broke the rules, why it sometimes works. You know, I was giving him all of the secrets, or my secrets also, because I was also speaking to him about my voice and what it likes to do and how it moves well and what the possibilities are. So after this very long lesson, we didn't really communicate anymore about the piece until it was finished. And then the score was sent to me, the preliminary draft of the score was sent to me. I was in London. I was in a hotel. I got the score in my hands. I rushed to my room, flopped on the bed, opened the score, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt like he had so deeply understood what I had said in a way that I didn't even understand, and created something that represented a fragility, a vulnerability, and a strength in the text, in the architecture of the music, in the structure of the music, that was incredibly powerful because of this combination of fragility and strength. And I couldn't wait to start learning it. So we made a few very small adjustments.
Because English is not my first language. And I had, I think, some not so put the text.
And that was it.
It could be better, yeah. But it's interesting to talk about the power of music. Yeah. And of course, what can music say that words cannot say, and what is music saying together with words, and what for a composer happens when I'm sitting with such a text, and that text opens to some music that comes, that wouldn't have been there without the text. Mm-hmm. And
well, sometimes you've spoken about uncovering the music.
Yes.
It's as if it's, you know, an archaeological site, and you have your little brush and you reveal what is there as opposed to creating.
Yes, somehow there's also the connection in the thinking between Paul and me, because the way you have the limitations of the words, and so you challenge yourself with the friction to find new things, the way, and be able to say something which you could not say without this. And in music, somehow it's the same. For me, somehow to be able to work with few things, and also to see what is in the music, and that it, in a way, to find things and find what it says to yourself and to the audience.
Interesting when that music, whatever power music has, is somehow different from the power that language has. Their discourse is a little bit different, and yet you were just saying that when you write music with words, it's somehow different. I wonder if music is doing a different thing when it is being part of the delivery of language than it does when it's by itself.
I have thought about it, of course, myself, for example, I think something happens when music is sung. When there's both, actually also the sound of the words, snow and day, and go now, the sound of the word is in itself music. And of course, when a song is played of an instrument, then of course it speaks, it sings to both the hearts of the audience and the mind, but something happens when it's the human voice.
Yeah.
With words, perhaps because it goes very, very deep into us, that song in this way. I saw it actually, was it in the program from yesterday where Hans Hense's wonderful 8th Symphony was played. Perhaps I remember wrong, but I was looking at the program in the afternoon, and Hense said that song is a part of life. It's life. And I think that's very, because when the song and the words comes together, it really goes, it touches us very deeply. Of course, an instrument can also do it. But
Shakespeare knew that too, I expect. That's why it's full of music. It's full of the music of words, and it's full of the music of music, and sometimes both together. The three of you are here, I think, because you're introducing this piece to a new orchestra. And you've performed with Berlin Philharmonic, with the Cleveland Orchestra, with others. What can you say in public to an audience like ourselves about what it's like to watch a new orchestra? Of course, Andres Nelsons knows this piece better than possibly anybody, at least how to make it sound in an orchestra, because he conducted the premiere and worked closely with all of you. But the orchestra don't. They were practicing. All this paraphernalia on the stage is from today's rehearsal of your piece, I expect. What's the experience like? What do you say to an orchestra, or what do you learn when a new orchestra plays a piece that is so close to your heart?
For me, it's always interesting because I have I have quite a few pieces that are not so well known that I travel with. So it's always the first time for the orchestra and often the first time for the conductor, and yet I've sung it 25 times or 30 times. And it's interesting to see not only the way the orchestra deals with the piece, but the way that they rehearse in general. We were speaking earlier about the energy of this orchestra. There's a playfulness. Perhaps it also has to do with Andres. There was a lot of laughter, and this is a serious piece. It's not a comedy. But there was a lot of laughter and a little bit of professional silliness going on in a good way, trying to figure out how are we going to do this? How do we play this? And so on. And it's always interesting because you get the kind of energy of the group combined with the conductor and the hall. And what we found with Cleveland, which was very curious and hadn't happened with any other orchestra, was that there was, this piece, we all think of Ophelia as an adolescent, although now she's 400 years old, 400 plus, and she's witnessed time. And now, today, she comes back and looks and sings these words. So there is a large element of wisdom in it. And with Cleveland Orchestra, it was fascinating because this is what was coming out, the kind of poignant wisdom with a little bit of distance in the piece that we had never experienced before. The tempi of certain movements were not what Hans had written, and yet it worked. with Cleveland. We decided not even to say anything. We thought, yeah, why not? Let's try. It's also a credit to the piece that it can, just like any other great work, the tempos can change. And now we're back with Andres, the original. And it's interesting because that freshness and the youthful quality comes from him, from his gestures, and I go back into the way that I sing this piece when I'm with Andres. And and then the orchestra is responding to our chemistry, whatever that is. So it's always different. This is the 11th orchestra, as I said. It's always different. It's always fascinating and joyful to prepare. And it feels like every time we uncover something else in the piece.
I have it in the same way. Of course, as a composer, it's a privilege to have a piece played where many times so many facets of it can be heard. And somehow, as a composer, to take your ego away and not just sing the pieces this way, but somehow it can, like all art, can be interpreted in many different ways. Just listen.
I asked Hans earlier whether he ever changed anything after hearing it, if something doesn't work or something. Doesn't it strike you as remarkable that anybody can sit down and write a piece for large orchestra without having a large orchestra to try it out on, and then you take it out to the Berlin Philharmonic and it sounds pretty much the way you imagined? And after several different orchestras played this, what Hans said earlier was, well, sometimes we have to work on balances. Maybe where it says piano for the oboe for this orchestra, I would make it mezzo piano for another orchestra, but that all varies.
But the problem is, for example, dynamics are very relative. It also depends on the acoustic. Perhaps I have written piano, and then it's too loud for one orchestra. Then I write pianissimo. Then you come to another orchestra, but then the pianissimo is too soft. Then you have to write piano again. So in the end, it has to do with human beings and in a way to understand.
One day, of course, you will have to let the piece go.
Yes.
You cannot be there for every performance forever, probably.
Me neither.
Yeah. And so, what's nice is to see that you each take pleasure and joy in the new things that each orchestra comes up with. So it's not a thing that's as fixed. Well, we know that from a Shakespeare play too. Every performance is different, and yet the art object is, in some sense, the same. And it wouldn't be art if it were inflexible and immovable, would it?